This version of the podcast is mixed in mono, but if you would like to listen in 5.1 surround sound, please visit ufocast.co.uk/prisoner for more details.
This is episode 4, but we recorded it 6th, back in January 2022. Welcome to By Hook or By Crook, a prisoner podcast, where me and my mate Luke have a special guest number 3, and we discuss, well, The Prisoner, that classic 1960s bit of cult TV, and basically we just have a bit of a chat. This time, we are talking about Free for All, but we have a special guest who is indeed a mystery to me. So,
he's largely a mystery to me as well. But this is like the first of these episodes that we're doing with somebody that is hitherto very vaguely known to either of us, I think, Michael. So we will let him introduce himself.
Oh, well, I am the new number 2, despite being number 3. My name is Swithun Dobson, and I'm another Prisoner fan that they've, by hook or by crook, got on the show. That's essentially me. I've done podcasts in the past. Some of you may or may not have come across the exceptionally good podcast of Impossible Things, rebranded as Impossible Podcasts about 8 years ago now, the Doctor Who podcast, which I did. So I'm sort of reasonably well immersed in sort of sci-fi fandom. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of my background.
Excellent, and welcome to our bit of the village.
Thank you for inviting me.
Which bit's that, Michael?
It's the bit underneath the green dome, I think. It's the bit full of people pushing the chairs up and down when other people press buttons.
Yeah. That had occurred to me this week. It was like, how much space is below that set for all the...
Well, we do see
stuff.
various number 2s come up, like as if they've just come out the shower or something like that. So I'm guessing that's number 2's actual living quarters down there. Because he must get into his little sort of James Bond-esque ball chair and then kind of go straight up and then sort of, hello, I'm here, without a little cat.
But as we've also discussed before, if for anybody who's been to Portmeirion, that set is much too big to fit in that building, and therefore the Green Dome is of course a TARDIS. So it could be any number of any amount of space below the.
That's true. So this week we're talking about Free for All, which is the episode that I watch, honestly, before every single election in the UK. Just before I get disappointed by the outcome, that is literally what I've watched for the last 3 elections in the UK, and had a very nice time. That's the highlight of the entire day when there's been an election, is watching this episode. So that's what it's about, because it's the politics one, I guess. Would be a good way of putting it. Or no?
Yes. Well, we'll get to that after we chat with Swithun a bit about why he's a Prisoner fan.
Yeah, so that is basically the way we normally do things, is we normally have a chat with our special number 3, and we find out why you are a Prisoner fan. So, tell us more.
Okay, so this is an interesting question. I suppose the thing that grabbed me, because I started watching The Prisoner about 10 years, about 12 years ago, I think. It was before I was married. It was sort of late university, or just graduated. And I think what grabbed me about it at the time was, firstly, the intro is excellent. I mean, you really get a really clear narrative right from the beginning, which sets up, some great questions, which are just narratively interesting. Why does he resign? Where is he? What is this kind of all about? And it sets up really elegantly, and I like the way that instead of trying to explain everything to everybody in all the episodes, it's like, well, just have the intro. Here we go. That's all you need, and then you can go from there. Now, whether that is actually all you need is another question. But I like the sort of like the fact that they try to treat the audience seriously, and not like, more sugar, spoon, you need it. No, you don't. Although if it was Patrick McGowan doing it, it was probably going to be like whiskey or alcohol. He doesn't like being in the cave for the few moments he's allowed to be there. in Free for All with his actual drink. So that's one aspect. And then just a general concept. I've always liked sort of like dystopia. I mean, it's interesting because The Village is like a utopia dystopia, and I've always liked that sort of idea and the inherent sort of political concepts. That's why I like Free for All particularly, and the whole setup of it is this idyllic place, but actually it's sort of sinister underneath. And what's particularly interesting as well about The Village is because there's no crime in the village. We don't need a police station, but there is a hospital, because all crime is just mental disorder, which needs to be sort of solved, which is very interesting with respect to things like therapeutics and sort of crime. And it's like, well, no, this is just a mental disorder. We should just change it, and we can solve society's problems. No one can actually commit crime or do anything wrong. They're just sort of miseducated or ill in some sort of sense. So I do think that's kind of interesting. The general aesthetics of the show, I think, still stand up. I mean, you watch it today and you go, well, I think you can tell from the soundtrack that it's kind of 60s. But you look at it and you go, okay, this is probably, but it doesn't date the way it's put together. And then it clearly, especially for a show of the 1960s, they seriously put a lot of money into the production. Like the editing, and it's very much more film-like than most of the TV shows of that era. I mean, even until probably the 2000s, really, until you got much more fluid camera work in TV than you had done historically. So, I mean, particularly, I like the sort of like surreal sequence in sort of Arrival with the statues. Is just really well edited, and it's also quite disturbing in the way it's kind of put together, and it's also like quasi horror in a sense. So the aesthetics is put together really well. And I mentioned the music. I think it's got a great title soundtrack, which just propels you and puts you into the where you are. And then the general sort of more avant-garde electronic stuff just really sits well with the sort of utopia dystopia place that they're in. So those would be my sort of like overall reasons why I think The Prisoner is interesting. Oh, and to say that one of the episodes, they bring up interesting questions. It's a very conceptual show. I've always been interested in like philosophy and other things. I'm not trying to say boring people, but it really attempts to deal with interesting questions and deals with them seriously, and doesn't just use them as a vehicle to advance the plot. They're actually done for another purpose than that. So I think it's well put together, it's well acted, got a great concept, and it's a conceptually interesting show. So that overall would be sort of why I say I'm a Prisoner fan.
And that makes total sense. It really does. So you've chosen this episode above all of the others. Why this one?
I think Free for All is probably up there with the top 3 episodes, I would say, of the series, which I'd probably put as, if you were to push me hard, probably Arrival, Free for All, probably Many Happy Returns.
Okay.
But particularly why I like Free for All is it's the concept, and it's the political element, and how you've got this. What I particularly like in this is you've got this regime, and hang on, let me talk about why I like it as opposed to just going into the analysis as to why it's particularly interesting. Well, no, I suppose that's one reason I particularly like it, because of that. But it sets up well again with he's wants to escape, because it's the general plot of about a lot of the episodes, and it's like we have democratic elections, and it's like okay, so this is just it develops well a little bit more about what the village is like, what is behind it. And I basically like the way he is sort of brought in and then manipulated to work throughout. And it's quite interesting how they attempt to bring him back to heel, as it were, basically operating as false opposition. That he is this new candidate, but he's actually always he's going to be the same as everybody else, because whoever the village win every election. It's like, who wins an election? The government wins every time. And it's that kind of idea. So I suppose I'm going off into sort of analysis of it as opposed to why I suppose that is, I say, why I like it. But I think it's well paced. You're always sort of unsure as to where it's kind of going to go, because they brainwash him and it kind of works, and then it kind of doesn't. It kind of wears off, and they have to send him again for more. And then you kind of get to the end. It's like, oh wow, what's going to happen? He's won. He's won at the end. Oh right, what's going to happen? Is he going to escape? And oh no, wait, the permanent bureaucracy wins again. And then you have the great bit right at the end when you have the rover worshippers in the cave, which is like, whenever I was rewatching it for the first time for a while, I was like, what? Why have they all got sunglasses on worshipping Rover in the corner? And it's like, this is slightly strange. And the whole sort of, again, it plays really well with the sort of surrealism that's played nicely in the series and works particularly well. Those are some uncoordinated general thoughts.
No, that made sense. Total sense. Yeah, no, we were getting totally why you get it, truly. So, Luke, you've been a bit quiet on this one. So, what are your thoughts with this episode, really?
Well, to be brutally honest, this is the first episode of the rewatch that I don't enjoy.
Fair enough. Tell us more.
I just don't get it. Like I as Swithun has alluded to, like part of the appeal of the prisoner is that it is slightly surreal, and there aren't any easy answers, and I like that about it. I just feel with this episode in particular, I just don't know what's going on for most of the running time. I can see the whole, like, the themes that Swithun's alluded to. I can see that they're there. That the idea of kind of going, okay, how can we break him in a fresh way? How can we try and brainwash him into doing our bidding? And the village always wins. I kind of get that, but the actual kind of the specific minutes of the episode as it goes by, it feels like it goes from one disjointed piece to the next, and I'm never quite sure why, and I'm going to for we're all Doctor Who fans. I'm going to compare it to the Sixth Doctor story Mind Warp.
Ooh.
Which is another Doctor Who story that I dislike for similar reasons, because that there's a similar thing in that the hero gets something done to his brain and he acts weirdly, and you're never quite sure what's him being him and what's him being brainwashed. And in that case, the cast have gone on record saying they don't even know what was supposed to be going on. And this feels like that. Like, I don't know when McGowan is acting in character as number 6 and when he's acting under the influence of whatever brainwashing technique they've been trying on him at various points in the episode. And I basically found myself not rooting for him in this episode and not particularly caring about what happened to him, because I didn't really get what was going on. I knew that going into the episode. I knew that this was one that I had not enjoyed in the past. And I was like, I'm going to try and watch it. I'm going to try and come to it with a fresh, open mind. I'm going to try and see the good stuff in it. And once again, it left me cold. So
no, I think
so. That's where I'm at.
Weirdly, you've got some actually more valid points than I thought, because this was, like I said at the beginning, one of the episodes I watch before an election, because that's what it's about. But I came at it this time in a kind of, right, we're going to be dissecting it, do a bit of research, rather than just have it on in the background and kind of let it, wash over you, because it's one of those episodes you put on if you're watching a run and you'll go like, yeah, this is the election one, we'll get through it. But this time I was actually making notes and I was paying a bit more attention than usual. And yes, I so need to talk at great length about the scene where they're worshipping Rover. But what we actually need to talk about is that this is the second one that was shot. This is written by McGowan, directed by McGowan, and it's the most, if you do an auteur theory, it's the most prisoner, his vision of the episodes. But what it really needed was a script editor to go, I see what you're trying to go for, but this bit makes no sense. This bit makes this worse. And this bit, although it looks great, and it will look great, makes no sense. And what's going on here? It's like somebody needed to be able to step up to him and go, do this bit again and do it better. Because visually, there's brilliant bits, like the Mountain Muhammad bit where he just walks through the door and he's already been on the phone and you're like, whoa, that's great. And there's a lot of really cool stuff going on. But when, like us, we're sitting down to think about it and giving it not as much thought as the writer should have, or the script editors will have, or even the director, because I know originally it was going to be the guy who ended up doing the second unit was supposed to be the main director, but McGowan ended up doing most of it. So he's got a great eye, because obviously you've got a director of photography for that. But there are big bits where you're sat there going, oh, this is great. What's actually happening? No idea. And you're right. You are completely right. The bit where, oh no, the reveal at the end goes, oh, that's cool. But you're like, but all the way through, she's been like, well, I don't know how old my listeners are, but it's like Ladka from Taxi, just making up some weird gibberish voicey thing all the way through. And she is quite odd. Let's face it.
See, actually, Rachel Herbert is one of the things about the episode that I like. That is one of the aspects of the story that I like. The whole she's been number two under his nose all the time. Like that twist is just. I mean, I can't remember how I felt when I first saw it, but it was one of those things where you just go, what?
Yeah, exactly. And the whole plot was her idea.
Yes, seemingly.
Yeah.
So I do, and just the way that she turns, and you can start to see her turn at the end. You can see in the expressions on her, particularly in the close up of her, and you kind of go, okay, there's some steel that's kind of coming out in her face, and then when he comes back in, and she's like,
yeah,
we have many, and you're just like, oh, you're kind of cut glass English. Oh, you're in charge. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So that's one of the that's kind of one of the few aspects of the episode that I really like and works for me. It's just it's all the rest.
No,
Swithun, why are we wrong?
Is it the point? Is it the point where the characters, for me, it jumps? It doesn't jump the shark. This show never jumps the shark till the end. This jump never but it never does that. But this episode goes off the rails for me, from a writer's point of view, as soon as after he has the chat with the civil service man, because after he's brainwashed, you're like, well, what is going on? Because he was trying to become number two, and then if he wins, he's going to do something. But he starts campaigning, but he's still he's one of them at this point. So who's the hero? Like you said, there isn't one, because he's working for them, because he's had his mind warped, like you said. So at this point, you're like, well, is he going to recover? What's going on? And his recovery, kind of kicks off a series of very tropey spy things, like I'm going to jump into a speedboat, I'm going to look at the helicopter, And that is the speedboat that is parked there in episode 1 that he completely ignores as a system of escape. You can see it on the Blu-ray, sat there in the corner, and you're going, Pat, look, there's a speedboat there. It's quite small in the shot, but I can see it. So can you, right? On a tiny little TV, it's not, but it's in Arrival, that boat, right? So yeah, these things are, there's flaws in it, I'll grant you that, but if you're not thinking about it and you're treating TV as a kind of a one-off event, all you're doing, we can pause it. We've come back to it. We're watching repeats. We're watching it for the umpteenth time, and we're going, no, still not quite sure what's going on. Go on.
I don't think... Well, it depends when you say what is going on, because I think it's relatively straightforward in a sense what is going on. The question is well, why is it going on and what does it mean? You're
completely right on that one.
Okay, so if I get the chronology of the episode correctly, he agrees to stand as sort of the new number 2, and then says, I'm going to find out who are the warders and who are the prisoners. And then says, you have all had information that has brought you here, and if you don't, you're going to all die like rotten cabbages.
Which is, I have to say, one of my favourite lines from the entire show. I absolutely love that. That line is brilliant.
It is a good line. Then he goes, then he sort of runs to number 2, then he goes to see, and he stands for that, then he goes to the room with all the delegates who are like 2A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, etc. Then goes down to Mr. Civil Servant and gets sort of brainwashed. But that's kind of interesting in that sequence is, one of the questions there is, to what extent can they read his mind?
Yeah.
Because the question there is, well, hang on, if they want to know why he resigned, well, of course, one theory is, of course, that they don't actually care about that, is that what they want is compliance rather than knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But treating it as if like a polygraph test is interesting, to what extent, what is he afraid of, etc., and the sort of hints that he's afraid of himself.
Sorry, because I will be interrupting, and I do apologise.
No, it's fine, go for it.
Right. During that whole square circle travelling towards him thing.
Yeah.
But before that, with the sugar, how many sugars he takes is a recurring theme in lots of episodes. Because he sometimes goes, I'll have 6.
Yeah.
And then he says, no, I've given up sugar 6 months ago. And you're like, what? So, yeah, how many sugars he actually takes in his tea is really up for debate. It's not even remotely canon at all. Because it's just...
But I guess that's the point, though, isn't it? Is that his changing his mind about how much sugar he will or will not take in his tea is one of those signs of individuality and lack of conformity, even to like his past.
No, fair enough.
Self.
Okay.
I think that's true.
Yeah. Which again, I mean, he's played on in various. I mean, the whole kind of like predicting what will happen in It's Your Funeral. Where there's the whole like the computer predicts what's going to happen, and number 2 doesn't believe that number 6 is going to buy some candy because it doesn't realise he's going to bump into another. Anyway, that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah.
But there's whole aspects of conformity and control, and number 6 kind of against the system. So
is he just on a diet and cheating?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Today I'm going to have no sugar. Wink. Yeah. Oh, right.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So
he goes to the truth test. He gets brainwashed. Then he starts campaigning, and then he is. I think is it the sequence when he realizes he's been brainwashed back in his apartment with number 58, who ends up being number 2.
Yeah.
Then he runs out and then does the James Bond stuff, which I always thought was a little bit lame. But I think, well, hang on, he's just realized he's been brainwashed. It's not entirely surprising he'd run for it at that point.
Yeah.
Even though it might be a little contrived. And then, so you got the brainwashing stuff, and then he comes back, and then he's asleep, and they brainwash him again with the big sort of like
the light over his head. Yeah.
Lamp that goes over his head. Then he campaigns a little bit more, and you get some more sort of bizarre things. What does number 2 do in his spare time? I have no spare time.
Yeah.
He's living to his limits. And what do you do with your spare time? Less work, more play.
More play, yeah.
This is like, okay. But it's quite fun because he ends up becoming this vacuous sort of political candidate who just says nothing.
Yeah.
With words.
And he's promising like any season you want at any time.
Yes. But then you get hang on. Let me get the chronology correct. And then he does that weird speech when he's on the boat, when he's talking about how he's going to beef up security in the village because clearly security is an issue in the village.
Yes.
Like the borders need to be controlled. Like, no, that's not really an issue when it comes to the village.
I mean, obviously,
of all of the things, that's the one thing that doesn't need to be controlled in the village.
No, but that's the point where he's most clearly reading off a cue card, and you're like, okay, this speech has been written for him, and he's really under the under the influence.
I think when I watched it originally, I thought it was kind of unclear as to when he was who he was, but I've seen the hang on, how many? In the last few weeks, I think I've seen the episode like 3 or 4 times.
Okay.
So that isn't what you would expect coming to the program from that. But I think actually the more you look at it, it is relatively clear when he is being controlled and when he's not. But even if he wasn't, in a sense, I think that's an interesting concept. It's like, okay, he's been brainwashed. Oh, okay. So is that him? In his own sort of thoughts as to what he wants to do, or has he been brainwashed? And so, if it is what he thinks, why does he think that? Or is that a ruse to make him think that he is brainwashed at that point, but he's not? And even though he might not be, and so it kind of. So I do think the chronology of it essentially works. Although I suppose you could, coming back to it, it's like, well, okay, why are they brainwashing? Why are they going through this whole thing charade to begin with? I mean, how does it advance any of the village's aims? I suppose you could say, well, the goal is just to completely mess with him as much as possible to hope he blurts out something. I suppose that's a justification for many of the episodes in the way. So if you don't like that, well, I think that criticism applies to many episodes because that's essentially the way they operate in a lot of the cases. So I don't actually think the chronology is too... Now, as I say, I watched quite a number of times, as I said. So I think when I originally watched it, I did think it was kind of like, oh, hang on, is that him? Is it not him? So I would defend sort of the general construction. I suppose the thing you could say is, well, why are you doing it in such a way whereby, I suppose you could criticize it on the basis that, oh, you can have him brainwashed, that's fine. And then he turns off the brainwashing, and then they should do something different to him rather than re-brainwashing. I suppose that would be structurally probably the criticism, if I was going to make it, I would, because you could say it's somewhat repetitious in the way it kind of operates. Although I think it kind of hides that just on the sheer sort of basis of what he does, even though it's sort of in the sort of plot mechanics quite similar. So that would be my defense of the structure of the episode.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think maybe I would just have to rewatch it again and go, okay, let's.
See, I've been quite harsh this last when I've been watching it. No, because I did think up to the bit where he gets brainwashed, McGowan was trying to say something, and then it is almost as if he decides he wants to say something different or something else. And he goes off tangent. He's got this hour to fill, and he's managed to say the things he wanted to say in the first 25 minutes. So then he has to fall back on, well, is it a spy drama? It's kind of meant to be a spy drama. Here you go, have a bit of spy drama-y stuff. It's like what you see in a James Bond film. You see them all sat around drinking. Oh, in this, they're sat around drinking non-alcoholic. Why? I must admit, this is not the week to have a conversation about politicians drinking, at all. When you listen to this in the future, you can just think back to what things were like in the UK in 2022 in politics, and you can probably
in January, yeah.
In January, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Given the speed politics is changing, you might need a specific date, but yeah.
Yeah.
But at this point, as we record this, that's kind of very big news. And here, the village is dry, and it's coming across that the village is always dry. Is that a thing? Because I can't remember other episodes where Is he drinking in other episodes, but he's not drinking?
I think that's generally a theme throughout, is that there isn't any alcohol allowed. I can't remember whether it's a specific thing in other episodes, but I don't recall any other drinking
Doesn't
happening.
he mention that there's non-alcoholic drinks to the woman in Chimes of Big Ben to say about, you need certain credits to drink this non-alcoholic?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
He does, which we did a couple of weeks ago, Michael. You should remember that.
No, I remember that, but I was thinking of other episodes further up the line. It's like, is that a thing? Because obviously in the Western episode, that's... Well, I suppose that would also be non-alcoholic as well, the stuff in the saloon, because it's more of an under the influence thing with different... Alcohol's going to alcohol is going to interfere with the mind control drugs.
Yes.
Which would be another reason not to give out drink. It's not like Blake 7 where you've got Soma and stuff like that. That would be a totally different podcast for a totally different time.
Oh, we're not doing Blake 7.
We're not doing Blake 7. You're refusing flatly.
Anyway, can we talk about the setting? Because one of the themes that's come up, Swithun, throughout our recordings thus far, and it was something that I only really started to notice when I watched on Blu-ray for the first time, and this is my second time watching on Blu-ray, is how obvious the episodes that aren't shot in Portmeirion at all are. And when I first got into The Prisoner as a kid, I didn't notice. I did not notice that there were some that were shot in Portmeirion and some that were like on sets that were made to look like Portmeirion. And this one really benefits from the fact that it's shot almost entirely on location. Like, you get proper, like, sweeping vistas of the place and the driving around in the cars, and you're like, okay, this is clearly... And I think, actually, you can also tell from the quality of the film stock. Yeah. There's a lot of kind of flickering light when they're outdoors using natural light, and it sort of stabilizes when they're indoors in sets. So I like it from the perspective of going, you get a lot of Portmeirion in this episode, and it's also one that, having been more recently, a couple of summers ago, and being more aware of the physical geography of Portmeirion, you kind of go, I can, because there's that bit where is it he runs off and then she chases him in the car, and catches him up round the bend, and I'm like, I kind of understand how that works now, because I physically know where, all the bits. So that's quite fun, seeing all the landmarks that you then get partially recreated in the studio in other episodes, but this one feels a lot more genuinely like in the village, and it makes kind of full use of that.
Yeah, my notes definitely say it's it's very heavy on the actual location, and you're right, it completely benefits from that, because it feels like he's running for an election there.
Yes.
Like the bit on the boat. Sorry, can we just have a shout out for the quality of the penmanship on those cue cards? They've even gone for a version of the Prisoner font that they're doing, and it's on screen for less than a second.
Oh, it's barely there, yeah.
But you're like, whoa, they've bothered. Why would you bother? That's really cool. That's going above and beyond from the art department. They didn't need to do that.
Yeah.
But they just pulled it off perfectly. My favourite moment from the whole thing isn't the worshipping of Rover, which I'm sure we'll discuss in a moment. It's the you know what? My brain just went because I was trying to go for a gag, but there is just so many. No, it's the bit where he's talking on TV, doing his blank speech directly to the broadcast, and then he gives himself the "Be Seeing You" salute at the exact same time that he's doing it on the other screen. Now we've discussed this on the UFO cast, how difficult it is. Well, how they couldn't film TV screens until UFO, so you couldn't on film shoot a TV picture without post-production editing and putting an image within an image, doing it with an optical thing, which is why they're always locked off shots, and Disney did it really badly, but here it's done well. So that the timing on that would have come from the editing, but it's so good, the way that he's saluting himself, and the graphics and everything, and it's so nice. There's also a lot of the Tannoy announcer, the Fenella Fielding, in this story, where she's actually relaying the news as well as the weather and what's going on. She's so much more of a character here than she becomes later on. It's almost completely gone. So
I'll tell you something else. I'll tell you something else I like. Having kind of gone in straight in with that, I don't like this episode. I love the sequence where he gets interviewed in the car.
Oh, God, yeah.
And then they immediately produce the newspaper as he gets to the end of the drive. And it's the whole absurdity of it. The fact that they make no pretense while they're interviewing him that they're just making stuff up.
Yeah.
And then there's the extra kind of icing on the cake of they've already printed it before they've even interviewed him.
It's
one of the best bits.
Absolute genius. I mean, that's one of the best bits of the whole series of The Prisoner. Just in general, it says everything. It's not just allegory, it's not just metaphor, it's just straight out comedy. It's brilliant. It just grabs you and just goes, oh, by the way, we're doing this. And you go, yeah, you've got me. I'm with you. If you're doing that, I'm so along for the ride.
The best bit is, what leads up to it is he's having the interview in the car and all the answers are no comment, in which he just makes stuff up. It's like, what is your security comment policy? No comment. We'll secure the village's borders, and then he asks, it's something like, oh, what you believe in respect to like God or like heaven or punishment or something like that?
What's your view on the afterlife? Yeah,
afterlife.
Like
and he says, mind your own business, and then he writes, no comment.
No comment.
For all the other ones, he just made stuff up. There's just no comment. So yeah, I really. I mean, what bit? One of the okay, Rover. But apart from that, I really like the bit in the weird bit when he's descending, when he's seen number 2 and he's been sent to the truth test room. When number 2 is going like insane, like smashing his hammer down, and the camera's spinning. Is like, what is going on here? I just think it works visually really well. He is really sort of gavel. He's hitting that hard, and he's sweating, and his like hair is flailing.
Right. With that scene, all of the books I've read, all of the research I've done, no one mentions that the pointy pyramid with the eye in the middle is the Illuminati, and on the back of the American dollar bill.
Oh yeah, of course
money
it is.
Sign, but it just doesn't get mentioned.
Hang on. I didn't even spot that.
It's right behind. It's right behind number 2. This massive all-seeing eye.
Number 2's eye like a judge, right?
Yeah. And
it's almost like the same eye is when it's number 1. When it's the Anyway, let's not talk about the end. But yeah, there's a giant pyramid with an all-seeing eye.
I didn't even spot that.
Watching him,
I remember watching that one the first time, and I was like, "This is brilliant." It's like it's the idea. It's not one side. It's not the other side. It's all one side. Yeah. And that's behind everything. It's not like you've got this sort of false opposition on the front that's trying to oppose each other. So I mean, take political things. I mean, take the CIA from American politics. They funded like the Committee on Cultural Freedom, which was the anti-Marxist, economic Marxist group. But also William F. Buckley from National Review was also a former CIA operative. So it was, again, sort of like back to both the left and the right had CIA links. I'm not trying to go into party politics and history here, but I'm looking like, whoa, McGowan gets it, and this is in 1967.
Yeah, but...
And there's the bit at the end where the old number 2's talking to the new number 2 as he's in the helicopter, and I think, does one of them say something
Give my regards to the homeland.
Going to the homeland, yes.
Yeah.
And you're just like, which... And there's always that question.
Which at the time felt Russian or German.
Yes,
but
I was going to say,
you've got Homeland Security.
Yeah,
so you're like,
that's true.
Whoa. So that, again, we've been giving this far too much thought. But yeah.
But it is that thing of like, obviously it's a British show, and you obviously have international characters, but mostly it's British people.
Yeah.
And there's always that question of like, well, has he been betrayed by his own side or not? To what extent? Who's in on the conspiracy, who's not, who knows about the village, who doesn't, and then with allusions to like the homeland. Well, where is that homeland? Like, and there's never really any definitive answer as to kind of who runs the village.
Not at all.
And we had Leah McKern in Trams of Big Ben, which we've talked about, saying it doesn't matter which side runs the village, because this is ultimately where we're all headed as an international community.
Hang on. Just one more point about the Illuminati thing, and then I promise I'll let it go.
Yeah.
Is that he says, "Where did you find these people?" Like the council, who you never see again, and he says, they were here when we arrived. It's like they've always been here. And in the GURPS manual for running the prisoner as a game, that's definitely one of the hooks of who really runs the village that you can go into if you want to really mess with your players' heads. Because that's where they've always been there, and they predate humanity. And yeah, you can go down some really weird rabbit holes if you want to read the entire GURPS manual of suggested who actually runs the prisoner. It's weirder than most of the other theories you'll come across.
Can we talk about before we talk about the specifics of rover worship? can we talk about how he gets there?
Yeah,
because that's really weird. And I think it's the only time this happens in the series, in that obviously it's well established that room is inside the Green Dome, and we see that door from both sides. In that you come into it from the outside. There's the kind of little foyer area that the butler shows you through, and then you see the doors and they open, and you're into number 2's domain. And then suddenly, in this episode, those doors open and he's in a cave somewhere with some rover worshippers. And then he comes back to do the door and he's in number 2's house. Now that's physically impossible. Like,
yeah.
And it's one of those moments where you're like, how literally are we supposed to take any of this? You know, we've talked before, and Swithun, you might have opinions on this, in that the location of the village appears to be in different places depending on which episode we're in. And the very end of the series, there are kind of weird hints about, well, how literally we are supposed to take what's just happened. And this is another of those moments where you're like, hang on, I can understand through the trickery of editing and set building, like physically how it was done, but like, what is that even supposed to mean in the context of the story? Like, what has actually happened to him? Has he teleported? Has the whole building moved? Has it rotated round while he's been inside, and it's now pointing to a different door? Or am I just overthinking it?
I always assumed that he went out of the door that the stretcher came through, and so there was just a back entrance, and he went into a cave.
But we never see another door into that room. That is the only door into the room.
But you see one at the back though, don't you? Because it opens something. Could he fire through the stretcher? Or am I completely misremembering this? There's a
no. The stretcher comes out the door, but I've always thought that's the regular door in and out of the room. You never see another door in and out of that room, do you?
No, you don't. But I never thought it was the same door because of the orientation of the. He never comes through it like that, and doesn't. Hang on. No, and he doesn't. I might have to queue it up and have a look.
It
doesn't come from higher up.
I
normally.
think you should. I genuinely think you should.
While we're talking, I might just have to go. I might have to check this because it might just be me going mad. I mean, how did it strike you, Michael? Are you thinking along the same lines as me, or have I just made up a problem where there isn't one?
I think of all of those scenes, the bit that really isn't worth mentioning is the geography. I mean, you've got something going on, but I'm thinking the guy's just turning up to clobber someone, and then, because this is the bit where he's been given the drink, yeah?
No. This is the bit at the end where he's taken over,
right?
And he then escapes from the room into the cave with the rover worshippers, and then he gets punched up, and then he's brought back in. And to me, I've always thought that door is the regular door in and out of number 2's room. And so I'm like, well, usually it doesn't lead. Usually it doesn't. So maybe I'm just wrong about this.
No, I never get to say this to you very much, but I think you're overthinking it.
Okay, well,
I think it's just an edit.
I'm going to see. I think
he gets carried out of one room, and then rather than follow him down some corridors, through some caves, and out the other side, and then into number 2's room, I reckon they've just kind of made an editorial choice of going, and he leaves one scene, cut to the next scene when he arrives, possibly stick some commercials in there at that point. So it's not like he's leaving. Well, maybe he does. I'm going to wait for you to watch it.
No, I'm looking at it right now.
The memory might be cheating.
It's the same door because the screen is on the right-hand side of the door.
Okay.
So it's the normal door that he comes in and out of number two's room into. So I'm right. So it's one of those things where you're just like, it's just weird. Yeah. So
maybe
because they come out the floor.
Yeah.
And then they go over to him and grab him. And he pushes him away, and he's running towards the door, and you can see the screen. So it's the regular door in and out of number two's room.
And then we get back to the original TARDIS idea.
It's back to the whole, it's a TARDIS, and for some reason at this point they've decided to move number two's residence briefly before they put it back again.
Well, what I would say is I think one of McGowan's his flaws is I think he can get too carried away with his concept, and then he becomes unmoored from the mechanics of the village and, in certain cases, plot. To put it mildly, in a particular episode, which we will not mention at present, he's so concerned about, in a sense, it's weird because he's so concerned for his message that even though his message is really quite obtuse and not necessarily straightforward to follow, it can harm, I think, the mechanics of how things play out. I think that is an issue in occasions.
Yeah, because if the general audience are sat there, even for a second, and they go, "Hang on, what just happened there?" It takes you out the story, and just from a purely practical point of view, nothing should take you out of the story like that. Just simple things like if you're watching a soap opera and you're like, that guy broke into a BMW and he just managed to just get into it because he had, he could do this with the lock, and for a fact in real life that X with a lock is impossible, or whatever, something like that. That takes you out the story for a second, so you can't enjoy the actual story. So things like what you've just said about, well, that door's in the wrong place, or how come that one door, that in and out door, unless the whole room rotates and it's like a secret doorway and there's one at the back, but because the whole room is rotated, you get lots of different exits. That's a physical headcanon-y excuse for why that one door suddenly exits out of the caves. Doesn't make sense, because that would allow number two to go out for a drink and have a chat with the rocket engineer who's, they wipe the boards down after they've taken photographs. So perhaps that's it. Perhaps there's one doorway on the inside and there's one doorway on the outside, but the whole room rotates so that you can leave through the same doorway but come out somewhere else.
That's a more plausible explanation.
And boring. So, sorry.
Well, yeah.
If I was a magician, that's how I'd be doing it. Something simple that would still make you go, oh. Or it's possibly how a Disney ride would work. It's like it's the stretching room or whatever you get in certain rides. You go in through one door, you leave through one door, but you're not leaving through the same door because something's happened, or that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Obviously, for anyone listening, that's not how the room works, I know. But, that's that kind of thing. Maybe that's it.
I'm just really surprised I'd never noticed. As I say, I watched episode 3 times recently, and I just assumed it was a different door.
I just assumed it was either a different door or there was an edit in there, and clearly there isn't, and that's just weird. It's just another bit of weirdness.
So as he runs towards the door, there is a cut to a close up of the door opening.
Yeah.
So you don't see the door behind it in the wide shot. It's like a lot of Prisoner episodes. There's some very frenetic editing there. There's kind of cut. And to kind of build the illusion that he's gone through the door. But yeah, that's what happens. And then okay. So Swithun and Michael, you both want to say stuff about rover worship.
Well, hang on. I can go first because the thing I want to say about rover worship isn't about rover worship. It's about the guy standing to the left of rover worship. That's the Watcher from Doctor Who.
What?
That's messed with your head. Right.
Well, I mean,
I was watching it on.
He didn't show up in my Doctor Who watch research, Michael. He's
no,
not
no,
credited
no,
on
not
IMDb.
the actor. Not the actor. He's dressed as the Watcher.
You're just saying he looks like him.
He looks like him. He's stood there like a statue, looking like the guy in Logopolis over the cliff, over the other side of the fence, just looking a bit weird. Now, I was watching it on a very small screen because I was going, oh yeah, I'll do this. I was actually watching it on a 6-inch DVD player, but all of a sudden my brain went, why is the Watcher standing there? And can only I see this? Because the guys just staring at the rover is what you're meant to look at.
I'm going to share my screen with you, and you can tell me. Right. So, are we talking about?
Oh, it's a statue.
It's a statue.
It's an angel. There we are. Sorry. Right. Can I just say I was not watching a Blu-ray. I was watching a DVD, and I was watching it on a screen considerably smaller than my laptop. Right. And right. So
I was just I've got that frame. It looks to me like a statue.
I would ask you to edit this bit out, but I've just shown myself up. So if you, Mr. Swithun, would like to distract everyone by telling everyone what you think of the rover worship, I'll just get my coat.
One thing I really like, it kind of, it's one of the sort of surreal moments that is sort of grounded in the mechanics of the village, and you have Rover appearing at, odd times. He appears in a decent number of times in Free for All. As for what he's doing and why is not obvious, as is, he is in certain occasions, because obviously he stops him escaping and brings him back. So I think he jars really oddly well. And it's like, okay, why are they worshipping Rover? It's like, oh. And especially you've got this idea of, who is the village and what are they? Got this sort of false opposition, and you have, we're trying to get to what the village is and what's behind it. And it's like, oh, they worship, are they just like Rover worshippers? How does this impact as to what the village is and how it kind of operates? And then it kind of gets the question is, okay, what is Rover? And, how does Rover operate? What is that? So I just think it works really well as a sort of somewhat surreal moment, which is sort of grounded into the mechanics of the show. And rewatching is like, oh, don't remember that bit. And it's really startling and just thought-provoking. So I think it's a great moment in the episode.
Yeah, I can agree with all of that. It's just plain weird. But I got thinking, it's like, well, what could they be doing? Like on a purely sit down, dissect the moment, what could they be doing? Because they're not just like watching TV. It's not some sort of virtual reality goggles thing? Obviously, it's not what was in the head of McGowan, because we'll never know. We can't sit him down for a commentary and just go, Pat, this bit here, what's this all about then? We can never do that, which is fine because it's open to interpretation, as is the whole of the series. It's just plain odd. It's a sort of thing that if it was in a Doctor Who episode now, there'd be entire hour-long podcasts of people dissecting it. It would be worse than the Doctor having the wrong jacket on for one scene, where you would just be going, it's just odd. So what are they doing? Well, I'm thinking, are they rover technicians, and they're trying to work out what's wrong with it? Are they engineers? Because like, if you travelled back just 50 years, and you were someone trying to fix a computer by reprogramming it with looking at a screen, and somebody saw that happening, from then they'd be like, that person's just staring at a blank screen with some text on it, trying to get something to happen, and that's just a very odd behaviour.
Yeah.
But now you got programmers that were just like, yeah, I'll just do this, and it's like, it looks like a typewriter, but it's not a typewriter. Or they're stroking a screen. If someone was like on their phone, you'd be like, they're all staring at small black oblongs, stroking them like they're cats. That's what it would look like from a different time. So perhaps it's just something technical that they're doing to Rover. We're saying worship, but they're just staring. They're sat down looking at it. So repair is because it's got Rover has got some sort of psychedelic effect. So perhaps, they have to give it, I would say psychedelic, but in the series it's psychic, that the attacks that it can do as well as physical. Because they rescue him at sea because they float him in, but that almost re-hypnotizes him, as if they're giving him another dose, so he starts chanting the whole, vote for me, as he gets dragged back in by rovers. I don't know what they're doing, but arguably I can kind of twist it into something that makes a modicum of sense. And I got to use the word modicum, which, that's nice, because you don't get to do that very often at all.
I mean, Rover is just odd anyway.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever seen an image of like the original Rover.
Someone said it was like a Volkswagen Beetle, but I don't know. I've not seen it.
I've seen one picture of it. It's basically like it's like a big Roomba.
Okay.
One of those robotic vacuum cleaners. It's like a big one of those, I think, from my recollection. So it was going to be much more of it's a robot that chases people round, and obviously for whatever reason it didn't really work. And then you've got it's a weather balloon, and it's just again, that's one of those aspects of the mystery of the show that I'm just like, I'm happy to kind of just roll with it and go.
No,
it's a
definitely.
suitably creepy, the noise that it makes, the way that it just bounces around, and obviously some of that is to do with the way that it's filmed, because there's various techniques that they obviously use to get it to move around seemingly of its own accord, and I still can't, like, to go off on another Captain Scarlet tangent. Watching that on Blu-ray, I can now see the little slots in the road that they use to drag the cars along, and it slightly spoils the illusion. I still haven't really figured out how they got Rover to do some of the things that they got Rover to do. I'm assuming there's bits where they're pulling it along on strings, and other bits where they're just kind of throwing it and seeing it bounce. And maybe there's just like hours and hours of Rover footage, and they kind of trimmed it down to seconds to kind of get the bits that they did. But it's a genuinely like creepy presence in the village, and this just adds to that with like whatever they're doing.
It's the only thing that the prisoner is scared of. He reacts. Because he's been attacked by it and ended up in hospital by it in episode 1. And he does react with fear. He gets herded into the meeting that he doesn't want to attend at the beginning by Rover. But he gets told repeatedly that he's expected at the meeting, but you almost expect him not to go. And it's not until Rover turns up and shepherds him in to go that he actually attends. So that is the only thing he's truly frightened of. Although, of course, he would say to everyone he's not frightened of anything.
Mm-hmm.
On the mechanics of Rover, I listened to an interview with Patrick McGowan, and I think they said that they used like 6,000 balloons over the series because they just broke constantly. They were really, really delicate, which is odd considering how bouncy it can be. It's like, if it's that delicate, how many times do you have to reshoot it? But they got an astonishing number of them. I mean, the question about Rover is interesting. An idea of like what Rover is from a guy called Colin Cleary, who's written a very interesting sort of overview of the prisoner as an essay. He kind of suggests that Rover is some sort of animal-machine hybrid, and sort of represents like the uncanny or the primal aspects of nature which can't be sort of controlled. And so the village is all about control, and this is the one thing they can't. So they kind of control Rover. Which of course they do. I think he disobeys at some point in the series, but I can't remember exactly where. And he's very much associated with, say, with like the lava lamps, and he kind of comes from the ground. Mm-hmm. He's very much sort of the earth.
Yeah.
And I think some of the number twos and of some of the village actually express fear of Rover, that he's not something that he is completely tameable. So is he like a representation of sort of like raw power of the earth, and how, are they sort of putting these goggles on to sort of like somehow view sort of like some sort of pagan deity and sort of imbue themselves with some sort of power of some description? I suppose that's maybe a somewhat wild interpretation, but I don't think, given the context we're in, particularly weird. That would be sort of a interpretation of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know it's Rover the thing. We do tend to gender it as male because Rover is gendered usually as a male name, but it's so amorphous and odd as a creature. I do think it's sentient, because it misbehaves and it gets into number two's area. So the idea of it being possibly some sort of biological entity does make sense. Again, one of the arguments is that Rover actually runs the village, but that would just be like, why would it want to know why somebody resigned? It's not human. It doesn't care. So that would make things even more complicated rather than anything else. So,
well, why not?
Yeah, but again, it's just as equally a reasonable argument as some of the other ones that come up and only exist until we take them apart.
Yeah.
The butler runs the village.
Well,
yeah, so that's another.
Well, he's everywhere. Yeah. He's always there. Is he? Well, I don't know. He seems to be related back to Free for All. He's sort of like the representation of the permanent bureaucracy. Whoever number two changes, the front man changes. Angela Muscat, the butler, is always there. You never remove him. He's always there. He's always like he's serving you. But is he really serving anybody apart from himself?
Yeah. I love the fact that on the back of the Blu-ray it just says The Prisoner, starring Patrick McGowan and Angelo Muscat.
Yeah.
Because they're the two actors who are in every single episode.
Yeah. Well, as the scripts go on, rather than just Butler, as he's named earlier on in the scripts, when they were actually writing it actually says Angelo, which is so cool. So clearly everybody got on and got and liked it. And wasn't the spin-off that was never going to happen meant to be the three of them and someone from an episode we've not discussed yet, sort of having adventures, which, Pat was well against happening. But that was one of the ones mooted by the production company going, well, we could do this. And so obviously he was a liked person because you don't get that kind of thing going on where they just go, yeah, let's have him. He'll be great. And he gets sort of named, which is nice. I know we always discussed very obscure things. So the bit that threw me, like I said at the beginning, was that the mountain can come to Muhammad. Yeah. And I just need to bring this one up because I thought, where did that come from? Because it's something that a lot of people say, but where did the actual phrase, the mountain can come from Muhammad, is? And we've got, I was sat next to one of the Muslims at work, and I thought, I'll just ask in passing. And he had literally no idea. Right, but I did a Google search, and then he went, oh no, it's all about splitting of the moon. And I went, you what? Because this did not, that was something that just came completely left field. I'm like, splitting of the moon, we're not doing a Doctor Who podcast and it's not an egg. What's going on? What's all this about? And apparently there was a whole prove to us that you are, a prophet, the prophet, whichever route you want to go down. And then it was a proof of power, but that's not quite it. It's more a case of I could make the mountain come to me if I needed to, but I don't need to because we can go for a walk. Was the way it was explained to me today when he'd gone home and asked his relatives because he didn't know either. But the first time that phrase appears isn't in UK culture. Is from Francis Bacon in I did actually write it down. I think it's 1625.
Yes.
Where he's quoting a Turkish proverb. So it's like it's gone round the houses and kind of changed its meaning. So I thought that's bizarrely, it's just a bizarre route for that language to have taken to end up at a point where it's definitely rooted in UK speak. And it's I forgot what the word is. It's a popular saying phrase. It's not going to be on catchphrase because that would be odd. But just say what you see. But it would be but you know what I mean. And if anyone isn't from the UK listening to this, they will have no idea what I was just referring to. But I just found it odd, and I thought I'm going to have to mention that it isn't. It's something that Francis Bacon came out with. So that's just
or in that other meme, France is bacon.
That's Denmark.
No, there's a whole story about a kid like mishearing Francis Bacon as France is bacon.
Oh, really?
And thinking that it was part of a quotation
Oh, right.
Nice.
Okay.
And so every time the quotation came up, he would always add, "and France is bacon." And then it wasn't until he saw it written down later in life that he realised it was the author. So final thoughts from Swithun, and then spot the Doctor Who actor.
So, I would defend. I defend the chronology of Free for All. As to why they keep brainwashing or whatever mechanically, I mean, yeah, you could say it's a little bit tired, but I do think they do things. I do think the political sort of satire in it does develop, and it is quite funny in places, and it just looks cool, and the rover stuff is great. So I would definitely say it is my sort of top 3 episodes. Yeah, possibly Living in Harmony is in the mix there as well. But yeah, upon copious amounts of rewatching, I think it very much holds up and is really a key to the nature of the village and what on earth is going on inside Pat McGowan's head.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I've enjoyed talking with you guys about it, and I may, when I revisit the episode next time, find more in it to enjoy. So as ever, spot the Doctor Who actor. This week is really, really hard.
Okay.
Because I don't even remember where one of these people even appeared in the episode. So if you guys spotted anybody from Doctor Who, then let me know. But Michael's shaking his head.
Absolutely no way did I see anybody from Doctor Who. Hang on. I'm being honest now. I'm having to think.
It's fine. You're not going to get it.
Okay, I was actually thinking it was going to be the civil servant. I thought he was going to end up being like third time road from the left.
He felt very familiar, but I looked up his credits and I hadn't seen him in anything. So the supervisor this episode is credited to Kenneth Bender.
Okay.
Who was the minister in the Claws of Axos. I don't remember the supervisor being a supervisor in this episode, but apparently he's credited on the episode as the supervisor. But I don't remember where the supervisor appears in the episode.
He's the minister in Claws of Axos. Like, that's quite a big part.
No, it's not. He's the guy that appears on the end of a video phone to Chin.
Oh, he's not Chin.
So he's barely in it.
Chin's
he's barely
not in this.
No. So there's him. I'm going to have to watch the episode again and go, where does the supervisor appear? The other two, and this is odd, because in other episodes, these characters aren't credited. The kind of people that have bust-ups with the prisoner generally don't get a credit. But in this episode, first and second mechanic, so I'm guessing the guys on the speedboat, who I think are then the same guys that punch him up at the end of the episode, both have very minor roles in Doctor Who episodes, none of which were credited. So normally they wouldn't count. I have one more to mention, and that is an honorary mention for John Casabon, who's the guy in the cave brewing his alcohol.
Right.
Who wasn't in Doctor Who, but he played a doctor in Quatermass 2. So I feel he gets an honorary mention.
We will never question Quatermass.
No. But yes, so very, very slim pickings this week for Spot the Doctor Who actor. There are more next week because we've already recorded next week's episode. So listeners, watch out. There's two for you to spot next week. But as ever, thank you for being with us, Swithun. Michael has the last word as ever, but it would be good to, if people want to find you online, is there anywhere they can find you?
I do some writing, not really sort of prisonery or Doctor Who-y. I do some more political stuff. I have a podcast called the Mind Crying Liberty Show with a friend of mine called Tim Patton. And so if you search for that, you'll find that on YouTube and on Podbean.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks for having us. Me.
So, as always, I'll sign off with, be seeing you.